Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and we're back for part two of our discussion of average spending by position group, or spending by position group, for the past 14 Super Bowl winners. Joining us to do that, the man with all the research, is Matt W.S. And I call you Matt Simmons on the first show. Now, you've taken on a different married name.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it. My wife doesn't listen, so she won't get angry.
All right. Very good. So anyway, Matt, really appreciate you coming back on. If you go back to that first episode, it is a great listen. In particular with the Tyler Linderbaum situation coming up, there's a lot of question about, what had past Super Bowl winners spent at center. Surprisingly, very little. The average spend in terms of cap was less than 2%. For the last 14 Super Bowl winners. There's only been 3 who really spent any money. We looked at the interior offensive line at guard. There's a few more JJ points spent there, but there were very little was spent there as well. So the interior offensive line seems to have been a point where teams have really tried to save money.
Yeah, it's been a successful place to look for value and to not spend for Super Bowl winners. It's been a really good strategy over the last 14 years.
And probably the other thing that was interesting and I think is better known is that quarterbacks, there have been relatively few teams that have spent any significant cap at quarterback in the last, or an extraordinary amount anyway, in the last 14 seasons. There's 2 Mahomes years that top the charts at about 17% of cap, but nobody else had paid over 13.5% of cap, with the notable exception of the 2021 Rams, who did all of the following: paid Matthew Stafford essentially and some other guys about 11.8% of cap, paid Jared Goff 13.5% of cap in dead money, and traded away a bunch of picks to get Stafford for the second largest JJ contribution or expenditure of any team.
That Rams team, I think if I didn't know they won the Super Bowl, they had 31% of cap in dead money. They had that unbelievable expenditure at quarterback. If you just show me that roster, I would have told you there's no way you can win, like, quote unquote, wasting that much money.
Yeah, so fascinating. So we're gonna look at the defense in this episode. Really encourage you to go back. There's some interesting. Matt made interesting points about wide receivers. The tight ends is really dominated by some great individual players, Gronkowski and Kelsey in particular, who've been with a number of the recent winners. But if you look across that group, I think there's a fascinating takeaways for every single position group. Very worthwhile listen. I appreciate you coming on again, Matt, to talk about the defense today. How about we start with the defensive line?
Yeah, another position of great interest to Ravens fans. I think build the trenches has been the call this offseason from many. It certainly feels like that from my Twitter usage anyway. And it has been a place where teams have spent cap in the last 14. You're looking at an average of 9.11% of cap spent on the D-line across the last 14 winners. And there's some big spends in here. The Chiefs in 2022 spending 18% of cap. I think they had Frank Clark and Chris Jones on the D-line at that point. The Rams with Aaron Donald in 2021. Again, big number at 14.02.
Okay, so methodology question on this. You mentioned Frank Clark. You're treating him as a 4-3 end in this, as opposed to an interior defensive lineman.
Yeah, so the edge and D-line was the most difficult positions to split. I left every player as they were designated by Sportrack as either a D-line or edge. When it came to linebackers, a lot of outside linebackers who were just listed as linebackers along with the inside linebackers, and I put the outside backers into edge players and I left the inside backers in their own little group. So if people want to quibble about Frank Clark being an edge guy, not a D-line guy, fine. I don't really particularly care enough to argue with you about it. I think these two groups could be seen as a singular entity. Yes. In many senses. It's the front. It's your 4 or 5 guys, depending, that are getting after the quarterback.
They share a lot of characteristics also in that they're the most commonly rotated position group on the entire football field. Now, you do rotate skill position players, so I'm not really talking about that in the same way, but on the defense, it's the front five or the front four for various teams, depending on what type of defense you play, that are the most rotated positions. Most of your other positions, they're on the field for most snaps, with the lone exception being weak side linebacker slash dime back being a place where a lot of teams are substituting as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. You'd maybe spend a bit more. You can't have a backup who's a significant drop off from your starter because they're just going to get attacked every time they're on the field. Even the high usage guys are taking 70% of the snaps.
Mm-hmm.
So you still need almost a third of the football game to be taken by these backups, these depth guys, if you want to call them that. They're just guys who do a different job most of the time, and so these bigger spends do make sense. And I think something else that we all know as fans is that every quarterback hates pressure in their face. It's the number one killer. Even great escape artists like Lamar struggle if they get quick pressure right up the middle. So investing in that interior of the defensive line is so important in a quarterback driven league to try and get that. Brady hated it famously. It was the one thing that you could really do to mess him up. So it is so important against these quarterbacks who are so good to have that, and successful teams have identified that and gone with it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I have said for now a couple of years that Travis Jones is really the guy driving the Ravens pass rush. He did happen to lead the team in sacks this last year, but even before that, all of the blocking that other teams did, all the blocking assignments had to be centered around how are they going to get Travis Jones blocked. And I think one of the interesting decisions for the Ravens coming into this next year is going to be whether they address in the draft and draft a 1 or a 3 tech to try and find Jones's new running mate. Now, I'm presuming for a moment that Matabike is not going to be back. Rumors are circulating. I do not care to engage. I'm just going to say this right now. I think it's actually quite unuseful and potentially destructive to engage in that discussion. But rumors are out there, and you can see them, and people are talking about it, about the possibility of him returning, and it's just, to me, it's out of place to do so. I would go into this draft assuming he's not returning. I'd be drafting as in the absence of additional information, I'd be drafting either a 1 or 3 tech to pair with Travis Jones.
Absolutely. I don't say Matabike's health is an unknown, and it's best left alone and not clickbaited. I think what we see now, I think what the Eagles did by using 2 draft picks, obviously they 2 absolute monsters in the middle of that line, and you see what that defense does powered by that. If you can get another game wrecker in next to Travis Jones, and you can let them just destroy the interior of teams' offensive lines, it gives Hamilton complete freedom. He's no longer the guy plugging the gap in your defense that he's really been for the last 2 years, as good as he is at that. You let Roquan run free. You let Jesse Minter do whatever it is he does on the back end in terms of coverages to try and get in the QB's head. To me, I coach defense a little bit in the UK, not to the level of your guests who are like real coaches, but a little bit. It just makes so much sense to allow you to give yourself as much flexibility as possible with all your other players to really have a couple of monsters in the middle of your D line.
Yeah, it's very hard to match up against that. Extremely hard. The teams who've been able to do it are generally teams that rush the quarterback very effectively with 4 men only. That's one of the very natural byproducts of that. And if you have the right defensive coordinator with that, you can still mix that up plenty with zone blitzes and other drop one, blitz with one kind of looks you want to give the other team. Still rush 4 and still be very effective with it.
Yeah, it's not as sexy as edge rusher, but I think you can certainly Mike Green, if they can develop Mike Green a little bit. You can pick up a veteran, a Khalil Mack, a Jadeveon and Clowney guy. You don't need a star on the edge if you've got 2 guys in the middle who will cause havoc. You don't need it. You don't need to send all your draft capital and all your money to Max Crosby.
the 23 and 24 Ravens kind of proved that, didn't they? They had Clowney, and then they had Van Noy, and they were first and second in the league in sacks, despite not having an edge rusher. And oh my God, we can't go into next season being at 24 without an edge rusher. We need another guy there. And then they were second in the league in sacks again, and things did fall apart in 25. And some of that was frankly on the interior. It was not having the great running mate to go with Travis Jones. I thought that hurt the Ravens as much as anything.
Yeah, all defenses are 11 guys. It's never 10 guys and one star. I mean, as much as Myles Garrett and these and Micah Parsons, these absolute superstar players force the offense to do certain things. You've got to double them, you've got to chip them, you've got to do whatever. It's always 11 guys as a cohesive unit. It's why I love football. It's the ultimate team game. If one guy does something wrong, you're screwed. So I think this kind of idea that you can only solve the problem by adding that one edge piece is just not looking at the full problem. We're looking at the box score, you're looking at the stat sheet, you're looking at the Pro Bowl. You're maybe not looking so much. And I want a superstar edge rusher as much as anyone. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like if the Ravens signed some mega star, there wouldn't be a little bit of my little kid brain in the inside going yes. But for me, it's not a good value.
Your work also gets directly at the notion that you can spend cap or you can spend JJ points to do this, but you really can't spend both. And this has been a mantra of DaCosta and the Ravens for years. DaCosta this offseason mentioned it when asked about the possibility of trading for a star player. And he said, the notion that you have to give up draft capital and then also pay the guy with a big contract, that's just it's too big a hit to take. So let's look at these teams and see how they allocated this money on the defensive line. The average cap expenditure for these teams is about 9.1%. I look at that as being divided among 5 players, but it may not work exactly given the number of 4-3 schemes that were played in here. The JJ points are pretty darn significant for this group, about 651 JJ points. So just to throw that in as one pick, which it would be, it's clearly more than one player you're talking about, but you're talking about a first round pick, talking about a pick between 28th and 29th overall.
Yeah, there's teams here with multiple teams over 1,000 JJ points, 1,200 JJ points on the D line. Because as I say, you've mentioned some guys who are DNs are in there. They're investing heavily in the trenches, and they're drafting a guy who's very, very good, or generally they're paying a guy who is very, very good. Most of the time it's somebody they drafted themselves, actually. But very, like you mentioned, very, very few are really spending both. I think the only one that you could maybe claim has done a bit of both was the Bucks in 2020, who had 1,200 points on that D line of JJ points, and also spent 10.5% of their cap. But that's nothing compared to the 14% the Rams spent, the 18% the Chiefs spent in 22. So it's really a case of, like you said, one or the other. The Eagles, and I think the Eagles is a good example of this. The Eagles obviously have a monster line. They spent 1,250 JJ points on it. Barely any cap, 4.5%.
Yeah.
You don't get those two guys that they've got in there, that D line that they have. You just don't get it by spending huge money and spending draft capital at the same time and have anyone around them who's really good. It's just too much to work in.
So the 2012 Ravens are an interesting group here too, because there's almost no JJ spend. In fact, it looks like it's the lowest JJ spend of any team. No, not quite. The Chiefs in 23 had less. A lot of second contract players. So you had Haloti Ngata on his second deal, making a lot of money. You had some other play like Mayaki Kimoyatu came back to the Ravens for that year and played a significant amount for the team. I'm trying to think of who else is even on that line. Arthur Jones
was there. He was cheap. He was 0.48%. I've got it up in front of me. I'm not going to pretend like I
Yeah,
remember.
okay. But he's a 5th round pick. I'm trying to think of who else is there that I'm forgetting on this.
Terrence Cody.
Mount Cody. All right.
Terrence Cody was on a rookie deal. We've also got, I think, because this includes like practice squads. So we've got D'Angelo Tyson. And
I can't get down to 29.6 JJ points if Terrence Cody is on the team because he's a 2nd round pick.
How are we there? Have I managed to 2 seconds? Let me just check, because there is always a small chance that I have managed to cause problems by transposing a number wrong, which I hope isn't. I did double check these, so if I've missed one, it should be isolated.
Okay.
Let me find it. Ravens 12, D-line 29.6. No, that's definitely not right because I've got it here. Okay. Yeah, it's 331.
Okay.
Is the correct number.
That sounds more like the right ballpark there.
Yeah.
And so you still had Arthur Jones on his first deal. He's a 5th round pick, so he wasn't particularly expensive, but the Terrence Cody would have been.
Yeah, Terrence Cody was most of that.
It's interesting because we're going to look at Sergio Kindle and the edge number for the Ravens. I'm sure that's the other part of that, since he was a 2010 draftee also.
Yeah, I'll go on to edge. Look at the other half of the front was the edge, and this is like the area where teams have spent big in both and succeeded. This is where teams have spent a lot of money on a player and also drafted a guy highly. So in terms of cap hit, cap percentage, you're looking at an average of 10.41, which is not that much higher than we saw for the defensive line at 9.1. There's some very big numbers. The Seahawks in 2013 had 20.5% of their cap invested at edge. Broncos in 2015, which I think most people remember that ferocious pass rush at 14.68%. The Bucks in 2020 had 15.44% of their cap. The Eagles in 2017, 14.12% of their cap. So some big cap numbers invested at the edge position, which makes sense. Premium position has been for a long, long time. Difference makers, and teams know that turnovers win games, sacks, fumbles, pressures, interceptions. What I find interesting from this is also some of the fact that they've spent a lot of cap. So the Broncos, that number, which I'm just going to sanity check, because now I've got the fear that I've messed up a second. So I'm just going to sanity check that number because it's a big number.
The JJ point number is enormous.
Yeah, the JJ point number is enormous. So I'm just double checking it before I tell people something that's not correct.
So would have had DeMarcus Ware and who else?
Von Miller. It was actually Von Miller, and Shane,
2nd overall pick.
Yeah, and Shane Ray. So almost all of that is Von Miller, who is also making a good amount of money.
Well, he was the 2nd overall pick, so he may have getting a lot of money for that. But he's also 2,600 of 3,360 in terms of the points. Just knowing the JJ chart.
Yeah. So it's Shane Ray's the only other guy that they've got there who took up JJ point with 760. So 2 high picks, and nearly 15% of the cap there in the Broncos, creating for that. So they're not the only team that succeeded in doing both. We also have the Eagles in 2017. They spent 1,288 JJ points to go with that 14% of cap. The Ravens in 12 had a 1375 edge thing, which actually no, they did not. God, did I just mess up the 2012 Ravens?
So the Seahawks seem to have the same number as the Ravens.
Yeah, that's why
a 2012 team had Sergio Kindle and Courtney Upshaw were kind of big failures as edges from there. Yeah. They still had Terrell Suggs too, so they were paying a significant percentage of cap.
Yeah, it was 905 is their JJ point. So you've got Courtney Upshaw, you've got Paul Kruger, and you've got Pernell McPhee. Oh no, sorry, hang on a sec. I'm not trusting my own. No, 13,754. That is correct. Sergio Kindle, Courtney Upshaw, Paul Kruger, and Pernell McPhee are all part of that number. So no, that number is correct. for the
Okay.
Ravens and the Seahawks. I remember checking this because it was weird when I put it together that those two numbers were the same,
We're
and
the
I thought
same.
I'd made it.
Wow.
I thought I'd made a mistake because they were the same, and I remember that I already did this because I didn't. It seemed very odd, but yes, so 13.6% of Terrell Suggs is in there, making a lot of money and making 9.55% of that, in fact, and all those picks. And maybe this is my poor memory. I don't remember that pass rush being that amazing, but
Well, they weren't. And the 2012, Terrell Suggs only had 2 sacks on the year, is my recollection. That was the year he got injured in the offseason. He came back to play at midseason, which is remarkably fast, but still very unfortunate that he was injured, I think, in a pickup basketball game, although I'm not sure they ever um,
admitted it.
admitted to exactly what had happened. But they didn't try and go after him monetarily. And it's almost, I think, the show Ballers, this happens to one of the players that they get hurt in a non-football injury, and Terrell Suggs is also on that show in a fairly excuse me, regular and prominent cameo where Suggs will pretty much do anything on camera you ask him to, apparently. And, have you seen the show before?
I haven't. It's not one that I've ever got to. I only tend to watch TV with my wife, and I don't think Ballers is something that I could convince her she wanted to watch, unless there's a lot of really good-looking guys in it, which maybe there is. Maybe we could go that route. But
it's they're athletes and whatnot, but Suggs is they're constantly talking to him and about things. And anyway, I won't go into it here, but he's that 2011 season was absolutely fantastic, and he was the defensive player of the year. And then 2012 he was hurt during the offseason before the year and was one of the big factors that held the Ravens down. They had a miraculous rebounding in the secondary, also including play from Kerry Williams and the slot corner who had 2 interceptions against the Broncos. I want to say Shockey Brown, but that's not right. Yeah, Corey Graham. Yeah. So pretty terrific, remarkable renaissance in the secondary really held that team through after injuries to Lardarius Webb, and I think Jimmy Smith might have been down for a portion of that year as well.
Yeah, let me just get rid of that one. So that was it's a position group that teams have invested in heavily in both Cap and JJ. So you can do that if you want and win. So I guess maybe my complaint about Max Crosby is not valid. That you can pay a guy. I don't think he's good enough to justify it. But that's just me. People who know more about this than me maybe would disagree.
If you brought in Max Crosby, he's going to use up most of that number right away, and in both categories, because what they're talking about is trading away 2 firsts to get Max Crosby, or a first and a second, or just it's utter crap what they're talking about. But let's say they're talking about a first and a second, and you're going to be let's simplify it. You're just going to trade number 14 for Max Crosby. The 14th overall pick's worth 1,100 JJ points. That already would catapult the Ravens to the top of the JJ point expenditures chart. Not quite the very top, but near it at least.
Everyone except the Broncos, I would say. Yeah. By the time you've got Mike Green in there as well as a second round last year. Yeah. Probably above everyone except the Broncos. And then you're also looking at a cap percentage probably north of what the Seahawks had at 20% by the time you're paying Crosby and everyone else. So maybe not quite that much, but certainly one of the highest cap percentages. It would be a huge swing, I think, is probably how
a big double-barreled expenditure of the type the Ravens are known not to want to do. And I really appreciate that about the Ravens. They're very fiscally restrained. They've done they've been, since the team has been in Baltimore, they've been one of the most successful franchises of all. They've been successful at the draft. And once you're successful at the draft, there's not a lot of reason to go to free agency for anything but supplemental needs. You don't have a lot of needs to go out and fill with a big name free agent. Typically, occasionally you can make one swing per year. You can go out and get Kevin Zeitler, and you can go out and get a a player who's pretty good, but you don't generally have to reach to the top of the market. That's for loser teams. Loser teams need to figure out how they're going to spend the cap dollars they have because their draft picks didn't work out. Good, great teams, they draft well, and they have to go through the heartbreaking process of letting some of their players walk.
Yeah, and there's only so much a singular player can do to a team. This is why we see so many of these position groups that you don't have one guy with a huge cap number elevating a whole team. It's so rare. I mean, maybe the quarterback position might be the only one you can do it, and even then, if you've got a terrible offensive line, I don't think it really matters that much. So yeah, the teams that you see every year taking huge swings, the teams that win in July, the Browns, and have done it a few times, where folk have looked at these rosters and they go, man, that's an unbelievable collection of names on a piece of paper. And then it comes to the time to play and it just doesn't work out for whatever reason. I'm much happier being really upset every year that we can't afford the superstar guy, because like you say, it means that the people that you're drafting good guys, you're drafting good players, you're signing the best of them, hopefully in terms of value, and then you're plugging it. I have a friend who's a Giants fan, and if you want to look at a team that has flailed, you look at the Giants recently, and he would have given anything to be a Raven, to have what the Ravens have had over the last 12 years.
I heard that constantly making kind of the rounds of the Giants shows when Harbaugh was hired. They all want to know, what are we getting with John Harbaugh? But obviously they're massively excited about the hire, and Ravens fans can't wait to slam the door on his rear end as he leaves, which is just, to me, is an unbelievable attitude to have. But anyway, the difference of what you're used to versus what you hope you can get is obviously very great. All right, let's move on to the inside linebacker position here. We're kind of running late again. I love this topic. I mean, just fantastic information you brought us, Matt. But what did you draw from the inside linebacker stuff?
So we'll make Vass very happy with some stuff here. So some teams have succeeded by spending quite a lot of money on inside backers, but not in the last 5 years. So the big numbers, we've got an average cap spend at inside backer at 5.66%. So that's for 2 starters, 3 guys probably. So it's a small number per player. And that's, you're looking at Ray Lewis in 2012 making up a big number. You do have the Patriots teams spent at inside backer. They had Jared Mayo. They had Dante Hightower when he was still playing inside backer. He played a bit of edge as well, I guess. So you could kind of say he was a hybrid. But from the Bucks onwards, so from 2021, from the Rams through to the Seahawks, much, much lower spends. The last 4 years, we're looking at the Chiefs spending 2.1%, 3.38%. Eagles spent 2.04%. The Rams spent 1.17%. The Seahawks in 25 3.16. Tiny numbers at inside backer. One thing I will say about that, you get freaks in there. Zach Bond is an unbelievable linebacker. He's one of the best linebackers in the league, and the Eagles got him cheap because they were converting him. If you wanted a Zach Bond at market value, obviously, but that's the name of the game.
Let me tell you about the online cannabis company that's changing the game, Mood.com. They created an entirely line of functional gummies, 100% federally legal THC blends, discreetly delivered right to your doorstep. And here's the best part. You can get 20% off your first order at Mood.com with the promo code RAVENS. Now, I've tried a bunch of their gummies myself. Each one's totally unique. The Sleepy Time gummies knock me out right away. They help me unwind fast, leave me refreshed the next morning. The Epic Euphoria gummies, they're perfect for when your day just isn't going the way you want it to go. What makes Mood special is how they pair the THC with natural herbs and adaptogens. You won't find blends like this at any local shop. They've got gummies designed for focus, relaxation, clarity, even energy, all made from cannabis grown on small, family-owned American farms. No pesticides, no shortcuts, just high-quality weed you can trust. Plus, Mood backs everything with a 100-day satisfaction guarantee. So head on over to Mood.com, check out their amazing selection, and don't forget to use the promo code RAVENS at checkout to save 20% off your first order. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. March is a time when we celebrate women, especially around International Women's Day. And it's also a chance to recognize how much women carry every single day at work, at home, in relationships, and in their communities. So many women are balancing responsibilities that often go unseen. For me, it's a good reminder to pause and appreciate the women who make a difference in our lives. Maybe it's your mom, your partner, your sister, a friend, or a coworker, someone who shows strength, compassion, and support even while juggling a lot to themselves. And it's also a reminder to take care of your emotional well-being matters. Therapy can be helpful in ways to create balance, set healthy boundaries, and focus on your own well-being. And BetterHelp makes that easy to connect with a licensed therapist online. They'll match you with someone based on a short questionnaire so you can focus on your therapy goals. And if the match isn't right, you can switch to another therapist at any time. With more than 30,000 therapists worldwide, millions of people served, BetterHelp has helped a lot of people find support. Your emotional well-being matters. Find support and feel lighter in therapy. Sign up and get 10% off at BetterHelp.com. That's BetterHelp.com.
Find the guy who's cheap. The Bucks in 2020 didn't. They had a lot of JJ points and a lot of cap. They had Levante David, and they had another linebacker who I should
before
know. Devin
White, right? Devin White.
It was Devin White
drafted that year, wasn't he?
Yeah, so they had Levante David and Devin White playing at backer in 2020, which is a huge investment. So 9.3% of cap.
Yeah,
and
that was the absolute peak of inside linebacker valuations. And of course, the Ravens drafted Patrick Queen that year, the next year, that year. Yeah, 21, they drafted Oweh and Bateman, right? So in 20, they drafted Patrick Queen at number 28. Jordan Brooks went at 27. Just the absurd amount of draft capital spent on inside linebacker at that point really showed up. And those guys, White and Bush, really didn't perform on their rookie contracts at all. White, in a lot of ways, has really never gotten it together, even though he's played for a while in this league. And Bush is just now really becoming a good player with the Browns, his third or fourth stop, whatever this is for him now.
Yeah, they finally got a defensive coordinator who's got the best out of him, maybe is part of it. And then obviously Queen didn't work out maybe as well as we'd hoped in terms of what the Ravens got out of him in his time. He wasn't really a player that we could rely on until Roquan was next to him, which is not the point of a first-round pick. And, you'd hope that Roquan can make lots of people better by being next to him. But yeah, what we've seen is since that point in 2020, it's just inside backer off a clip, and the JJ points are low as well. It's not, people are not drafting these guys highly at all. You've got a very, very low JJ point spend. And
to be clear, there are some guys still drafted in the first round from inside linebacker.
Oh yeah.
But it's the Super Bowl winners don't tend to draft such players.
Yeah, like the Lions, Jack Campbell's an unbelievable player, but they haven't won anything. So you can take limited, as successful as well as Dan Campbell's done turning that franchise around, they haven't won. And that, as Ravens, that's what we want. We want to win. So I don't really want to look at what the other really good teams have gone and been like, we should copy that. It's like, well, no, we're already a really good team. You don't need to copy another really good team. You need to look at the teams who have done that last 5% and what are they doing differently. And that's where the Ravens need to look at. I don't like people talking about what the Bears have done. And again, he's turned them around. And I'll look at his blueprint when they've won, not before.
That's fair.
Again, that's maybe a bit short-sighted, but that just seems sensible to me. So yeah, the Bucs spent 1,700 JJ points in 2020. They had that at linebacker, which is absolutely nuts. And the Seahawks in 2013 had a big inside backer spend. But I would be happy for somebody to tell me that the game is, the inside linebacker position is not the value now it was then. I don't think that's a totally unreasonable thing to say. The one thing, when I thought about doing this to begin with, I thought about doing Super Bowl contenders. Partly because I think the Super Bowl can be a bit of a coin flip situation, and one game is not. But Fred Warner is the obvious one because the San Francisco 49ers have made a lot of Super Bowls, but his cap hits actually haven't been that high, because I went to look specifically at Fred Warner. but he also hasn't cost a lot of money. So that, say, people like Vass, who are very, very vocal on their feeling that Roquan Smith is not somewhere we should be spending money, are very much vindicated by the last 5 years of Super Bowl winners.
Well, I mean, that's if certainly true. I mean, if you look back at Ray Lewis, it looks like a reasonable expenditure. And the nice thing about it, well, in the case of Roquan, you have to look, okay, so if the Ravens had won the Super Bowl in 23, the year after he was acquired, year after Roquan was acquired, the JJ points from those traded second and fifth round picks would still be showing up in that JJ column, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they would still be there. I think that I'm not against. I think we should keep Roquan. I'll just be clear on my position on this. I don't think cutting Roquan this season is the right thing to do. We don't know what Teddy Buchanan is going to be like after injury. You've got whole new coaches coming in. Roquan is more than just a dude on the field making tackles. He is a human being in a locker room with other human beings, and that matters. Anyone who's ever played on a sports team knows that matters. Anyone who's ever worked in a team knows that is a thing that happens. So I'm not pro cutting Roquan. I think he's a really important part of this defense. But if you want to just be completely cold and point at data and numbers about it and not really consider the fact that these are humans, not robots, I think you could say that the Super Bowl winners recently have seen inside linebacker as a place to save money and been successful. And the days of Ray Lewis, Patrick Willis, early season Bobby Wagner, these guys, maybe it's not as important as it was when those guys were running it.
I see. I kind of like paying one. Don't have a problem paying one. I'm really a fan of platooning at the weak side linebacker spot. So I think you avoid like the plague having a second linebacker where you're paying Patrick Queen money after you're paying Roquan, or you're drafting JJ points. And that was one of the problems that the Ravens found themselves in, is they had to replace Queen at the Mike spot. He really, wasn't the right guy there. And they first replaced him with Josh Bynes. So it's not like they went and got Roquan, but then they did go out and get Roquan, and Queen was not the right guy for that pick. He was a double failure in the sense that he didn't really play well at all in his first couple of years in the league. And he also was not a Mike ever. I still don't think he was a Mike when he went to Pittsburgh. He's just a missed tackle machine there in terms of what happened. But it was a double-edged sword. They had to go out and replace him with a guy they also had to trade more JJ points and then pay a lot of money to, who has since had multiple all AP1 designations to hopefully make it worth it.
Yeah, I mean, he's a fantastic linebacker, and I'm excited for what Jesse Minter will get out of him. I think great coaches elevate not so great players, but what they can do with great players is something else. One, just for context for anyone, so the Roquan's cap hit this year is about 10.5% ish of cap. So the linebacker room for the Ravens this year would, if they won the Super Bowl in 2026, it would be the most expensive of any of these linebacker rooms, including the one with Ray Lewis. But 37-year-old Ray Lewis was so I say nothing is impossible. No one had won the Super Bowl with 25% of their cap going to a quarterback, half of which didn't even play on their team until the Rams did it. So it's really silly to turn around and say you can't do it because you just don't know. But it would be an outlier in recent history if they did. And
there would still be, actually, Roquan signed a deal that extended him. So now I got to go back to my question from earlier. 22 Roquan would have included the JJ points, right? But 23 Roquan, he signed a new deal. So all of a sudden his JJ points, the JJ points they paid to acquire him don't matter anymore.
I should have Roquan as a trade I have missed, because what I did with the JJ points, and I'm going to go back and find the Roquan trade so I can add this in quickly. So what I did with the JJ points in terms of trades was I would keep them in for as long as those draft picks would have been on the rookie contract on the team. The way I personally saw it was that you are, so that was a what
It's a sacrifice of draft capital you're making over multiple years. I agree with
yeah.
that. That actually makes more sense than what I'm suggesting here.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so he would have. So I need to. He is a guy that I hated doing the Ravens ones because they make so many trades. And when I was going through the list of trades, trying to find the ones that included players and weren't just draft picks, it took forever. It was very, very frustrating. It's the only time I've been annoyed at Eric DaCosta, really, um, was going through the.
All right, maybe you make yourself a note, and we'll keep moving
I'll
here.
add this in. Yeah, let me just put trade. I'll put trade in there, and I'll fix that. So if anyone gets it, you can have the JJ points for Roquan in there.
All right.
So yeah,
let's move on to the cornerback spot. Now, this is a place where I would have guessed that there'd been some top flight corners paid, and there's really a lot of corners on rookie deals. Seems to be the thing we pull from this.
Yeah, a lot of rookie guys. Some high picks for sure. Some good draft. You've got an average of 886 JJ points spent on the room. I mean, that can be as many as 5-6 guys, but you don't. You've got the Seahawks in 25. They spent 1770. They've got two.
Devin Witherspoon.
Devin Witherspoon was what, the 5th overall or something like that. He very
sounds right.
So they obviously spent a lot of draft capital on their corner room. Yes, Witherspoon was basically almost all of that. And you also got the Chiefs spent quite a bit on corner. McDuffie, I think, that was the first year of his, or he was on his rookie deal. He's just been traded. Broncos spent on corner in 2015. The Eagles spent obviously on corner in 2024. Big time, really double dipped on corner. So it's been, this is another one where teams seem to have felt that the thing to do is to get rookie guys in rather than pay a star. The Patriots in 2014 are a bit of an exception. They spent 11.3% of cap on their cornerback room. But there's quite a big variance, actually. This is one that I looked at. The average cap spend is 5.98%. But you've got huge variance when you've got the Patriots at 11.3 and you go all the way down to 1.99% with the Eagles in 2017. So vast differences in how they've approached the cornerback room, but the majority of teams have aimed at drafting guys.
So the 2012 Ravens are an interesting case here because they're at 6.61, almost directly in the middle of what teams have spent at the position for champions. But they had Lardarius Webb, who basically was lost for the entire season and had just gotten paid in 2000, after the 2011 season. So he was in the first year of his deal. I don't know, that may have been a fairly low cap hit, and so not a significant percentage of the total because it was the year one.
2.17.
So not that big.
Not that big a cap hit. Jimmy Smith, obviously first round pick, 22nd, I think, overall, at 1.41 of the cap, and then and you've got Kyrie Williams was 1.6, and then a bunch of
Corey Graham.
Corey Graham might actually be listed as a safety on Spotrac. He was listed at 1.08. He was listed as safety. I didn't change anyone. I looked at Corey Graham and I thought that was a bit weird, but I didn't want to start messing with it because if I leave it, it's then Spotrac's problem, not me messing with one team that I know well. You've got Asa Jackson and Chucky Brown and Emmanuel Cook, a bunch of some scary names in there.
Yeah. guys he didn't want on the field, but that's interesting because there really is no one guy that makes up a significant portion of that 6.61%. No. I thought it maybe was Webb, but
Jimmy Smith, I think having Webb cheap, even though he was injured for the year, I'll say, but Jimmy Smith on his rookie deal looms large, I think, over that group.
Right. That's most of the JJ points still being. He was in the late 20s. He was, I think he was supposed to be drafted 27th, and they tried to trade the pick, and then somebody else bagged out on them, like the Bears maybe. And then he ended up being drafted late and 28th because of it.
Okay.
But it was one of those two. Might be in 27, might have been 28, but it's one of the two times they've had weirdness around their pick, along with the 2003 first round pick.
So I still have the draft capital from Ladarius Webb because he was drafted in 2009.
But he was on a second contract, so it probably
he
shouldn't
was.
have been.
It probably shouldn't have been. I didn't know that his second contract had been there. But he would still be on the rookie number because it would have been an extension, surely. 2009, 10, 11, 12. So that should have been the fourth year of his rookie deal.
Yeah, that's a good point. So they had made the deal, but the cap hit wasn't gonna hit them till the next year. But then you should be hit for the JJ.
Yeah, so I didn't look at contracts. It was like if they're in their fourth year, then they will still be on their rookie deal because I made the assumption that teams will have extended them.
Here's what I really appreciate this, Matt. You're trying to do the right thing on each basis, and what you're doing makes complete logical sense in terms of how you would allocate that JJ cost, and whether or not, in the case of a special situation like Webb where he's extended early, but it was a true extension, and it was after the fourth year, then you should have a JJ point value that's still in there. I really appreciate that the methodology is clearly sound from looking at these individual cases where I think it makes a lot of sense what you're doing.
I assume the number is high because he made Pro Bowls and All Pro, and he hit some kind of escalator because he was a third round pick.
That's right.
That's right. So yeah, so in his fourth year, and that's why the number is still at just over 2%. But no, I tried to do it in a way that made sense. Otherwise, there's no point. It's so hard to try and capture how much teams are spending because you can never say, because I'm not looking at void years and what the numbers in these contracts of some of these veterans actually are in terms of the long-term hit. So I decided just a snapshot in time is the best we can do. And obviously I missed Rokon trade, which is bad since it's the Ravens trade. Maybe I didn't look that hard because it was the Ravens when I was much more careful with all the other teams I don't know so well. The cornerbacks are certainly, I like drafting in the same kind of wide receiver mold. I like the idea of just kind of having your conveyor belt and keeping drafting high quality corners high up in the draft and maybe not paying a guy. So what happened to Sauce, unfortunately, this year, the Colts gave up an awful lot for him. And then, it just happens. And it's a lot to put into one guy in a position which is so athletically demanding, and an injury like that you can derail a whole career. You can lose explosion, and they could never be the same player again. He could be brilliant. He could come back absolutely as good as he was before or better, but it's a lot of risk.
When we're talking about Lardarius Webb in this, I mean, I think you can make a very legitimate case that Lardarius Webb had a Hall of Fame career derailed by injuries in his first and third season. His first and fourth season, I guess it was, right? Yeah, because he got hurt in his rookie year, and wasn't really right again in 2010 after that. And then in 2012, he got hurt a second time. And those injuries, those derailed what could have been just a fantastic career.
An unbelievable player when he was available, and like you say, what steal in the third round. Just feel real bad for the guy that he could have had such a special career, and just it's luck a lot of the time, isn't it, with these things?
All right, well, let's move on. We've got one position left to go, and we're running out of time here. So let's talk about the safety position.
The safeties. I was a little bit surprised at how much people spent on safety. I have to admit, I think it's an area that a lot of people would say is devalued for a lot of the recent past. So we've got an average of 7.04%. That's probably only 3 guys a lot of the time, maybe 4. Some big hit. The Ravens.
For most teams, it's only going to be 2 players who basically split the snaps. There are exceptions where a team has a dime back or a safety playing slot, but for most teams, it's going to be 2 players.
It's going to be 2 guys on who you really need that for. And obviously the Ravens are one of the big cap percentages here in 2012 because Ed Reed, it's fine, pay Ed Reed whatever he wants. And prosper. The Patriots in 2018, 13.06% of their cap in its safety. Very, very big number for the safeties. They had Devin McCourtney
Yeah, he's the big one.
Is the big one in there. Patrick Chung was making good, and Duran Harmon was also making okay money. They actually had quite a few safeties on their team that year. They obviously deployed a lot of dime snaps, probably. I mean, Belichick did a lot of things, and that's so that this number is maybe a bit high because they had a lot of safeties. If I go back to their corner number is still quite high. So yeah, that might be why it's quite so big. But kind of like corner, big variance. You've got the Bucs paying 2% of their cap to their safeties in 2020. You've got the Rams in 21 paying 2.21% of their cap to their safeties. So some teams have got by and not big JJ point investments for those.
That was the other side of this coin, is that it looks like teams are willing to pay a veteran safety. A safety who's been around their team for a long time. They're willing to pay him, but they don't really want to spend a lot of draft capital. No one over 1,248 JJ points. So none of the recent teams have spent a high pick on the safety. And by comparison, Kyle Hamilton, that pick was 1,100 points. It's not like the Ravens have only that. They had Starks at 27.
I think this kind of speaks to something that you recognize, is that safety is really hard to learn at the NFL. This is one of these positions that, and this is why I'm quite high on Starks. I think that playing safety is very, very difficult at the NFL level. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to look at. The quarterbacks are so good at manipulating you. You have to process so quickly. It takes a year, sometimes two, for guys to really get up to game speed. And if you're looking at spending a 10th overall pick on a guy and you're thinking, well, it might not be till his third year that I'm getting the best out of him, that's a lot of your cheap years gone. Whereas if you spend that on a wide receiver who week one can look like an absolute megastar, or a tackle who you will desperately need probably, but also can come in and usually play relatively good. I think you say C-level for a first-year player at offensive line is very good.
Yeah.
But safety is so complex. And just a slight diversion, I know we're running on time. Anyone who wants to, I know you love Nick Emmanwori. Nick Emmanwori would not have the season he had if the Ravens had asked him to do what they asked Malachi Starks to do.
Oh, if they had asked him to play free safety, it would have been a much more difficult year.
So I think it's always just on those two players, if people want to think about them that way, you can't compare them because they were doing different things. And so but I do think that's why safety, people that teams maybe are resistant to spend high draft capital on it, and losing those years.
The other side of that is that you go out and you get somebody else to be your free safety who's cheaper. And Alohi Gilman might have been a player who could have been serviceable as a free safety. And in particular, if his tackling was not the central part of what he was doing. In the case of Emmanwori and Hamilton, you put those two guys on the field together, you don't have any problem with the overlap between those two guys because they're both so damn good. I mean, they
yeah, I think you would have seen Hamilton at free safety a lot this year. I think that's what you would have seen. I love Emmanwori. He's an unbelievable player. Mm-hmm. I just don't think it's fair to compare what they got out of Starks with what the Seahawks got out of Emmanwori, because they essentially played completely different positions in their first year. And maybe in 4 years, 3 years, when they end of their rookie deals, maybe I'll look at this statement and I'll look like a complete idiot because Emmanwori is an all-world safety in every aspect, and Malachi Starks is a very good safety. That's fine. I'm happy for that to be. I'm happy to be wrong in the long term. I think in the short term, free safety is so hard. There's so much to learn. It's so easy to be wrong that I will give Starks a little bit more leeway, and I think it bears out in what teams are not willing to do, which is spend a high draft pick on a safety. The Seahawks in 2013 actually spending $1,200. That most of that is Earl Thomas, Ravens legend Earl Thomas.
There you
go. Just as while we're talking about free safeties, but yeah, that I think you're right. Teams will go get yourself a serviceable veteran free safety who will be in the right place. Yeah. And that's what most successful teams do, and use your draft capital elsewhere on a guy who can impact week one.
How upset are you going to be if the Ravens decide they want to take the risk, say, on Caleb Downs at 14. By the way, I think Caleb Downs is probably going to drop till late in the first round at this point. Maybe I've even put it differently. If the Ravens were to pick up Caleb Downs in round 2, how upset are you going to be by it?
Oh, not at all. I was a DB coach when I coached the football team in the UK that I coached. I would like what my little brain goes to what you could do with Starks, Downs, and Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
What Minter could do, a guy who's that smart, man. That's exciting. I love watching defense, and maybe I should be mad, but I'm not cold and analytical enough to be mad in the moment. I would just be too excited. My little like the kid would be like, the possibilities are just exploding. You've got maybe a couple of months later, I'd look at some of the other guys who were drafted just after him and be like, man, we could really have used that dude. But
it happens not every draft, but this happened 3 times now in the last 6 years where I've been really, actually 7 years, where I've been really upset about the Ravens picking or not picking at safety. And everybody knows them by heart right now. Derwin James, they passed over, and they did get additional draft capital for it. And then they drafted Queen over McKinney, which is just an abomination of a pick.
Horrible.
And I just the way that's worked out is pure misery. And I'm not as upset about Starks over Emanwari. I'm not. But I thought Starks was probably a second-round talent. And unfortunately, what you're saying has been absolutely correct about the free safeties from the 25 draft. All had trouble adapting to the NFL level. Watts, despite the fact he had a bunch of interceptions, allowed a lot of yards per target. Starks was very high in terms of yards per target, and Makuba, who was a guy I thought was a really good late-round option, as a mid to late round option. I think he ended up getting drafted the 3rd round, maybe. I ended up giving up the most yards per target of anybody.
It's like value. I say I'm not a big draft guy. I don't watch enough college tape to really get into it too deeply. But I do get I do agree that the position that Starks was taken is maybe a little bit of an is a bit of a reach. And you do wonder. I mean, it takes 2. If you want to trade back, you need somebody else who's willing to trade back with you. You can't just like, oh, we'll just trade back, it'll be fine. And maybe that's what happened. But you do think maybe you could have got that guy at the top of the second. Is the 5th-year option really that valuable at safety? Probably not, because you got guys like Kyle Hamilton, Derwin James making big money.
It's a legitimate franchise tag spot too at safety.
Yeah. So yeah, I do think, I agree. It's an overpay a little bit. I think we might have a similar problem this year. I think at 14, we may not be elated with the guys that are on the board, but there may not be a team willing to move up, and you just got to take your guy. I think we might be in that position this year. Hopefully we get somebody that we can be excited about and we're not going to be super mad.
Matt, absolutely outstanding material. And I want to point out again, we're going to try and Matt is going to try and make this spreadsheet available to folks. But tell people where they can contact you if they want to talk football.
Yeah, if you want to tweet me, I'm on Twitter at Matt D Simmons, Matt with 2 T's, Simmons spelled SIMMONDS. My profile pic is a little Lenny from The Simpsons, if that helps. I will sanity check this again to make sure I've not. Obviously, I'll put the Rokon thing in. I'll double check on my numbers to make sure I've not messed something up before. But I'll try and find a way that I can share this with anyone who wants to look at it and play with it.
Outstanding. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, hit me up. This is a great season to get in your franchise building stuff. Also point you to the shorts I'm doing now, the 1 to 3 minute videos. Maureen's got me doing them. I've gotten in the habit of putting them out there. I'm really enjoying them, and people seem to be appreciating them. Give them a chance if you would. And also use hashtag Film Study Mailbag for your questions, whether you're asking a question to me and Voss or a question you just like answered in a video. Matt, thanks again for coming on.
I'm muting myself. Thanks very much, Ken, for having me. It's been great.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.